The rain had been falling since early morning, soft at first, then heavier as the day went on. The small street where she worked always looked quieter on rainy days. People rushed past with umbrellas, keeping their heads down and their clothes close to their bodies, trying not to get soaked. Inside the little tailor shop, she sat close to her sewing machine, guiding a piece of cloth through the needle with patient hands. She had been working since sunrise, finishing a dress that a customer needed for a family event. Her elderly mother rested on a small bed in the corner, wrapped in a blanket, listening to the sound of the rain. Even though the shop was simple and small, she kept it clean and warm. It was the only place she had built on her own, and it was more than just a shop to her. It was her way of surviving, her way of supporting her mother, her way of holding on to hope even when life felt too heavy. By late afternoon, the rain grew stronger. She stepped outside for a moment to pull the small shade closer to the shop's entrance so the water would not seep in. As she did, she noticed someone sitting on the steps beside her shop. At first, she thought it might be someone just sheltering from the rain, but when she looked closer, she saw that the person seemed to be shivering. He was a young man, maybe in his late 20s, his clothes damp from the rain. He looked exhausted, like he had been walking for hours without rest. His head was lowered, and for a moment, she wondered if he was unconscious or simply trying to keep himself together. She walked a little closer and spoke softly, trying not to startle him. "Excuse me? Are you all right?" she asked. He lifted his head slowly. His eyes were tired, his face showing signs of stress and pain. "I'm fine," he said, but he clearly wasn't. His voice trembled, as if the cold had reached deep into his bones. "You don't look fine," she said quietly. "Are you hurt?" He hesitated, as if unsure whether he should speak. Then he held his side gently and nodded. "A little eye. I was robbed earlier today," he said. "I was passing through this area when two men stopped me. They took my wallet, my bag, my phone, everything. I tried to ask for help, but no one wanted to get involved. I've been walking for hours." She felt a wave of sympathy. Robberies were sadly common in busy areas, but seeing someone harmed always made her heart tighten. "Wait here," she said, and stepped inside her shop. She poured a glass of warm water and grabbed a small towel. When she returned, he looked surprised. "You didn't have to do this," he said. "You're cold," she replied simply. "At least drink something warm." He took the cup with shaky hands and sipped slowly, feeling the warmth spread through him. His shoulders relaxed just a little. She handed him the towel to dry his face and hair. "Thank you," he said softly. "I didn't expect anyone to stop for me." "It's nothing," she said. "You shouldn't sit out here in the rain. If you want, you can sit inside until the rain stops." He hesitated again. He looked at the small shop, the simple interior, the sewing machine, the small bed where her mother slept. "I don't want to cause trouble," he said. "You won't," she replied. With a slow movement, he stood up, wincing a little from the pain in his side. She helped steady him as he walked inside. He sat near the door while she handed him another towel. The warmth from the shop made him feel safer, calmer. Her mother, half asleep, opened her eyes and glanced at him. "Who is that?" she asked. "Someone who needs a bit of help," the young woman answered gently. Her mother nodded slowly, trusting her daughter's kindness. Minutes passed quietly. The rain tapped against the roof in steady rhythm. The man looked around the shop and noticed the many neatly folded fabrics, thread spools stacked carefully, and dresses hung on a rack. "You're a tailor?" he asked. She nodded. "I learned from my mother. We've been running this shop for years." She paused, looking at him. "What about you? Where are you from?" He sighed softly. "I'm from the other side of town. My family, well, they're comfortable. More than comfortable. But that doesn't mean things are easy," he said. "I had an argument with my father today and left the house to clear my head. I didn't expect to get robbed afterward."
Oh, yeah.
She didn't comment on the argument. Everyone had their share of problems. Instead, she asked, "Does anyone know where you are?" He shook his head. "I doubt it. I tried to ask someone if I could borrow a phone, but..." He paused again as if trying to choose his words. "People get scared easily when they don't know you." He lowered his gaze. She nodded in understanding. You can use my phone later if you need to call someone. His eyes softened. You're very kind. More than I deserve? She shook her head gently. Anyone would do the same. But in truth, not everyone would. The world was fast and harsh, and people often looked away when help was needed. But she had learned long ago that kindness was something you gave without asking for anything in return. For a while, neither of them spoke. The room felt calm, almost peaceful despite everything. He watched her sew, noticing how her hands moved with care, how she focused as if the world outside didn't exist. It amazed him how someone with so little could create something so beautiful. You're very good at this, he said quietly. She smiled a little. Thank you. I've been doing this since I was young. We depended on it. It's not much, but it keeps us going. It's more than not much, he said. It's honest work, she didn't reply. But his words touched her. Many people look down on small jobs. Hearing someone appreciate her work felt rare. As the rain softened, he stood slowly. I should probably go before it gets too late, he said. You're still wet, she replied. At least wait until your clothes dry a little. She paused, then added, You can sit here as long as you need to. He looked at her with a gentle expression. Why are you helping me so much? She thought for a moment. Because you needed help, she answered simply. He smiled faintly, as if he hadn't heard something so genuine in a long time. As the hours passed, he told her a little more about himself, how his father expected him to take over the family business, how he often felt trapped in expectations he didn't choose, how he longed for a place where he could breathe without feeling judged. She listened quietly. She wasn't used to hearing someone from a wealthy family talk so openly about struggles. It reminded her that everyone carried a weight, no matter how they looked from the outside. Sometimes he said softly, I feel like I don't fit anywhere. Even in my own home. She looked at him with understanding. Maybe you just haven't found the right place yet. He nodded slowly. Maybe. The rain eventually stopped, though the air outside stayed cool and damp. He stood again, this time with a bit more strength. Thank you, he said with genuine emotion in his voice. For the water, for the towel, for listening, for everything. Just take care of yourself, she replied as he walked out of the shop. He paused and looked back at her, almost as if he didn't want to leave. But then he stepped into the street and disappeared into the fading light. That evening, as she closed the shop and prepared dinner for her mother, she thought about him more than she expected. She hoped he reached home safely. She hoped he found peace. She hoped the world would treat him gently after such a rough day. What she didn't know was that, on the other side of the city, he lay awake on his bed, thinking about the small shop, the warmth inside it, and the stranger who treated him with more kindness than anyone had in a long time. He didn't know why it mattered so much, but something inside him whispered that their paths were not meant to cross only once, and he couldn't shake the feeling that the simple kindness she showed him had sparked. Something he had been missing for years, a sense of being seen, understood, and valued not for his name or family, but simply as a human being. He knew one thing for sure. He would return. The next morning began like any other for her. She woke up before the sun, boiled water for tea, and checked on her mother. The air was still cool after the long night of rain, and a faint smell of wet earth drifted in through the window. She liked mornings like this. They made her feel calm, even if her days were usually busy. She opened her shop right after sunrise. The street was quiet, only a few shopkeepers sweeping the front of their stores. She set up her sewing machine, arranged the folded fabrics, and took a moment to breathe before starting her work. But as she tried to focus on stitching the hem of a dress, her thoughts kept drifting back to the young man from the day before. She wondered if he had reached home safely. She wondered if his family had welcomed him back warmly, or questioned him about where he had been. She wondered if his injury still hurt. She didn't know why she cared so much about a stranger she had met only once. Maybe it was because he looked so lost. Maybe it was because he reminded her of something she couldn't name. As the morning passed, customers came and went. She took measurements, made adjustments, pinned fabrics, and handed out finished clothes. But every time the shop door opened, she found herself glancing up, half expecting to see him again. By noon, she told herself he wouldn't come. People from wealthy families didn't usually visit small streets twice, but just as she was preparing to iron a set of clothes, the shop door opened with a soft creak. She looked up and froze. He stood there, not with the tired, cold look he had yesterday, but with a shy, hopeful expression that almost made him look like someone else. His clothes were clean, his hair neat, and he held a small paper bag in his hand. "Hi," he said softly, almost unsure whether she would welcome him. Her surprise slowly melted into a gentle smile. "You came back," he nodded with a small laugh. "I said thank you yesterday, but I wanted to say it properly today." He held out the paper bag. "It's just some snacks. I passed by a bakery on my way here and thought, maybe you and your mother would like them." She hesitated for a moment, not used to receiving gifts from strangers, but his expression was sincere, almost boyish. She took the bag lightly. "Thank you. That's very thoughtful." He stepped inside the shop and looked around again, this time with more awareness. "I hope I'm not interrupting your work." "You're not," she said as she placed the paper bag on the small table. "I was just finishing some stitching." He nodded and walked closer, stopping a few steps away from her sewing machine. "I wanted to check on you too," he said quietly. "I was thinking about yesterday, about how everything happened. You didn't even know me, but you helped me without hesitation. People don't do that often." She shrugged lightly. "It just felt right." For a moment they stood in silence. Then he pointed to the dress she was working on. "What's this one for?" She explained how a customer needed it for a cousin's engagement ceremony. He listened with interest, asking small questions, nothing complicated, just genuine curiosity. It surprised her how natural it felt to talk to him. Most strangers made her cautious, but he didn't. He listened with the kind of attention she rarely received. He stayed for almost an hour that day. He sat near the corner, sometimes watching her sew, sometimes telling her little stories about things he had seen on his way there. When he finally stood up to leave, he promised he would return soon, and he did the next day. And the day after that, and the day after. Sometimes he came with something small fruit, bread, or a packet of tea leaves. Other times he carried nothing except a smile and the same gentle curiosity. He never acted superior or made her feel small. He asked about her day, her customers, her dreams of expanding the shop someday. He shared bits of his own life too, carefully at first. As if he wasn't used to being heard, he told her how his father wanted him to step into the family business, managing large projects and dealing with people he barely knew. But he wasn't sure that life was meant for him. "Maybe I sound ungrateful," he said once, "but sometimes I feel like I'm living someone else's dream, not mine." She didn't judge him. She simply said, "Everyone deserves to choose their own path, even if others don't understand it." Those words stayed with him for days. His visits slowly became part of her routine. She didn't admit it out loud, but she looked forward to them. Her mother noticed too. "That young man comes often," her mother would say with a small smile. "He seems to respect you." Not many do. She never responded deeply to that, but deep down, she felt something warm whenever her mother said it. One afternoon, the street was unusually quiet. Most shops were closed for a local event, but she kept working, trying to finish a bundle of clothes before the weekend. She was so focused that she didn't hear footsteps approaching until she heard a soft knock on the doorframe. It was him again, but this time he looked different. Not sad, not cheerful, something in between. Like he was carrying something heavy in his mind. "Are you all right?" she asked. He walked inside and sat down slowly. "It's been a difficult morning," he admitted. "My father and I argued again. He thinks I'm wasting time. He thinks I should focus only on the company, not on—" He paused and looked up at her. "Not on anything that matters to me." She listened quietly as he continued. "He told me I have no idea how the real world works, that I've been too protected, that I don't understand struggle. And maybe he's right. Maybe I've lived comfortably all my life, but that doesn't mean I don't feel things. It doesn't mean I'm not allowed to want something different." He sighed deeply, leaning his elbows on his knees. She moved her sewing aside and walked a little closer. "Wanting something different doesn't make you wrong. It makes you honest," she said softly. Not everyone has the courage to admit that. He looked up at her, his eyes gentle but tired. You make it sound so simple. It is simple, she replied. But simple things are often the hardest to accept. That made him smile faintly. You always say things that make sense? She looked down shyly. I just speak what I feel. He stayed long that day. They talked about worries, dreams, memories, and fears. He listened to her stories of helping her mother, the struggles of running a small business, and the hope she carried despite everything. It surprised him how strong she was, how she endured so much without complaining. As the sun began to set, he finally stood up to leave. But this time, he hesitated at the door. Can I come tomorrow too? He asked. She didn't answer immediately. She looked at him, at his uncertain eyes, at the quiet hope behind them. If you want to, she finally said. His smile widened. I do, and so the days continued. Sometimes he helped her organize fabrics or move heavy boxes. Sometimes he swept the floor while she sewed. Other times, he simply sat nearby, quietly enjoying the sound of the sewing machine and the peaceful atmosphere of the small shop. There were moments when their hands brushed by accident, and both would pause for a heartbeat longer than necessary. Moments when they caught each other smiling without reason. Moments when silence between them felt more comforting than words. One evening, as they stood outside the shop watching kids play in the street, he said something unexpected. He began slowly. I feel lighter when I'm here. Like the world outside stops pushing me for a little while. She didn't know how to respond at first. His voice wasn't dramatic. It was soft, sincere, almost vulnerable. I'm glad you feel that way, she finally said. He turned to her and gave her a small smile. One, it felt like a quiet confession without words. But just as their bond grew stronger, life had its own plans. One morning, he arrived at the shop earlier than usual. His face looked pale, his shoulders tense. She knew something was wrong even before he spoke. My parents found out where I've been spending my time, he said, his voice strained. They don't understand. They think I'm being irresponsible. She felt a small knot form in her chest. What did they say? He looked away, unable to meet her eyes. They want me to stop coming here. She felt the air around her grow heavier. She didn't speak for a moment, unsure what to say. I told them, it's not what they think, he continued. I told them you're kind, that you helped me when no one else did. But they wouldn't listen. They think I'm wasting time with people who don't belong in our world. He finally looked at her, his eyes filled with conflict. She swallowed softly, hiding the hurt that rose in her heart. Maybe they're just worried, she said, though the words tasted bitter. He shook his head. No, they're worried about what people will say. That's all. She had no answer. She simply looked down at her hands. I don't want to stop coming here, he said. I don't want to step away from the one place that feels real. She looked up then, meeting his eyes. But your family, my family doesn't understand me, he whispered. For a moment, neither spoke. The room was filled with unspoken truths, fears, and something deeper, something neither dared to name. Finally, she said softly, maybe you should take a few days to think. Not because they told you to, but because you need to be sure of what you want. He stared at her with surprise, then slowly nodded. Maybe you're right. He stepped back toward the door. Will you still be here? He asked, almost in a whisper. She gave a small, gentle nod. I'll be here. He held her gaze for a long second, long enough for both of them to feel the weight of what was changing. Then he finally walked away as she watched him disappear around the corner. A quiet ache settled in her heart. She didn't know what the next days would bring. She didn't know if he would return, but deep inside, she hoped he would. What she didn't know was that he felt the same. The days ahead would test him in ways he wasn't prepared for. But the bond between them had already begun to take root in places neither of them fully understood yet. And life was about to change for both of them more than they could imagine. The days after he left were heavier than she expected. She tried to focus on her work, tried to keep her thoughts on the fabrics, the stitching, the orders she needed to complete. But every time she sat at the sewing machine, Her mind wandered back to him. She would glance at the corner where he usually sat, expecting to see him leaning back with a gentle smile or asking her some quiet question about her work. But the chair stayed empty. Her mother noticed the quietness in her movements. "Is something troubling you?" her mother asked one evening as she folded clothes. She simply shook her head and smiled lightly. "Just tired." But it wasn't tiredness. It was worry. He had said he would think things through, but she didn't know what that meant. Would he choose to return? Would his family convince him otherwise? Would their worlds drift apart before they even understood what was happening between them? On the fourth day, while she was restocking threads on the shelf, the shop door opened. Her heart jumped too quickly, to hopefully for someone who was used to staying calm. But when she turned, she saw it wasn't him. It was a customer dropping off fabric. She reminded herself not to expect anything. People had their own lives, and she had hers. But late that afternoon, as the sun began to set, she heard footsteps approaching the shop again. Slow steps, unsure steps. She didn't turn around this time. She didn't want to disappoint herself again. Then she heard his voice. Oh, she froze. Her hands stopped moving. Slowly, she turned to face him. He stood in the doorway, the fading sunlight behind him. He looked tired, as if he had been thinking too much and sleeping too little. But there was something else in his eyes' determination. "You came back," she whispered. "I told you I would," he said softly. She felt warmth spread in her chest, but she kept her voice steady. "Did you? Think about everything?" He nodded, stepping inside. "Did. More than I expected to." She waited silently. "My parents didn't like my decision," he continued. "We argued again. They said this place, this street, this shop, none of it fits with how they raised me. But I told them something for the first time in my life." He paused, looking straight at her. "I told them they don't get to control where I find peace." Her breath caught for a moment. "I don't know what the future holds," he said gently, "but I know I don't want to stop coming here. I don't want to disappear without trying to understand why this place matters to me so much." He swallowed softly. "Why you matter to me so much?" She looked down, feeling her face warm. "You don't have to say anything that will cause trouble for you." He stepped closer, not too close, just enough to show he meant every word. "It's not trouble. It's honesty." She didn't know what to say. Her heart felt full and fragile at the same time. He finally broke the quiet by laughing softly. "I'm sorry if I made things uncomfortable. I just wanted to be honest." She shook her head. "You didn't make things uncomfortable. I just didn't expect it." They stood there quietly for a moment, their eyes speaking more than their voices could. After a while, she motioned toward the chair he always used. "You can sit. I still need to finish a dress before evening." His smile returned, soft and familiar. He sat down, watching her work the way he always did, calm, curious, admiring in a quiet way. "What did you do these last few days?" he asked. "Worked," she replied. "What about you?" He sighed, mostly argued, and thought. "I kept remembering the way you told me everyone deserves to choose their own path. It felt like the first time someone said that to me without expecting anything in return." But she felt something shift inside her. "My father doesn't understand why I want something beyond business meetings and deals," he continued. "He thinks feelings are a distraction. He thinks life is about practical choices, not emotional ones." He paused. "But isn't life made of emotions too?" She nodded softly. "It is." He leaned back in the chair, watching her in silence for a few seconds. "Do you ever feel like your life is too small?" he asked suddenly. "Like the world is big, but your place in it is tiny?" She stopped sewing and looked up at him. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but then I remember that small places can hold big dreams." He smiled. "You always say things like that." She shrugged gently. "I just speak what I feel." After that, he began visiting regularly again, maybe not every day, but often enough that her heart learned to expect him. And every time he came, the shop felt warmer. One afternoon, he arrived carrying a small notebook. She looked at it curiously. "What's that?" she asked. "Something I've been working on," he said, turning the pages slowly. I've been writing ideas about what I actually want to do with my life, not what my father wants. She felt proud of him without saying it out loud. Do you want to read something? He asked. She hesitated but nodded. He opened to a page and handed it to her. His handwriting filled the paper, messy but full of emotion. The page described a small community center he dreamed of opening someday, a place where people could learn skills, share stories, and feel safe. It's not a big dream, he said nervously, but it's something I care about. She handed the notebook back slowly. It's a beautiful dream, he exhaled with relief. I was scared you'd laugh, or think it's childish. Why would I laugh? She asked gently. Dreams don't need to be large to matter. They just need to be yours. His eyes softened. Thank you for always understanding me. As the days passed, small moments began weaving themselves between them. Moments so soft, they almost felt fragile. There were times when he helped her cut fabrics, their hands brushing lightly. Times when he told her stories of his childhood, while she listened with quiet smiles. Times when she made him tea, and he insisted on helping her wash the cups afterward. Times when he asked about her mother, genuinely interested. One evening, after helping her close the shop, they walked slowly down the street. The sunset painted the sky in soft shades of pink and orange. Do you ever think about leaving this city? He asked. Sometimes, she said. But then I think about my mother. I can't leave her. I didn't mean leaving her, he said quickly. I mean, going somewhere new someday. With the people who matter to you? She felt her heart skip, but didn't respond. He continued, his voice quiet. I've always wanted to travel, but not the way my family does. They go to expensive places, take photos, eat at fancy restaurants. I want something different. One want to see real places. Places that feel alive. Places where you don't feel judged. She looked up at him. Maybe someday you will. Maybe, he whispered. If I have the right person beside me? Her breath caught again. They were walking so slowly that it almost felt like they weren't moving at all. But just when life seemed to be settling into something gentle and beautiful, it shifted again. One afternoon, a large black car stopped in front of the shop. She didn't think much of it at first. Expensive cars sometimes passed through the area. But when the door opened and a middle-aged man stepped out, her heart tightened. The man looked stern, dressed in a crisp suit, his expression sharp and heavy with authority. He scanned the shop with cold eyes before stepping inside. Are you the young woman who runs this place? He asked in a voice that left no space for warmth. She nodded carefully. Yes. How can I help you? He looked around the shop again, almost judging every detail. I have something to discuss with you. About my son? Her heart dropped. Your son? She repeated. Yes, he said. He has been spending far too much time here. And I want to make something very clear. She felt fear rise in her chest, but she kept her voice steady. Please, speak. The man stepped closer, lowering his voice but not his tone. My son belongs to a certain circle of people, a certain world, and this. He gestured around the small shop. This is not where he belongs. She stayed silent. I don't know what he sees here, the man continued, but I want you to understand that whatever he thinks he feels, it cannot continue. I won't allow it. Her hands trembled slightly, but she kept them hidden behind her back. I don't want your money, she said softly. If you think money, the man interrupted with a cold laugh. I'm not here to offer money. I'm here to warn you. Her heart pounded. My son is emotional. It's naive. He doesn't understand the consequences of getting attached to people who cannot be part of his life. He needs to focus on his future, his position, his responsibilities. And I won't let a temporary distraction ruin that. Oh, she swallowed hard. Your son is free to make his own decisions. The man's eyes narrowed. Not when those decisions lead him away from the life he was born into. Before she could respond, the shop door opened again. He walked in. He stopped immediately, recognizing his father. His expression changed from calm to tense in seconds. Father, what are you doing here? His father turned to him with disappointment written all over his face. Trying to fix your mistake. "She isn't a mistake," he said firmly. The man's jaw tightened. "We will discuss this at home." He grabbed his son's arm, but the young man pulled away sharply. "Don't." The air grew heavy. She stood frozen, unsure what to say or do. "If you walk out of this shop with me now," his father said slowly, "you can still come back home. You can still have the future we planned for you. But if you stay here," he pointed toward her, "then you're choosing a path that has no place for you in our world." The young man looked at his father, then at her. His eyes softened with emotion. Fear, love, confusion. And in that moment, she realized something. Whatever he chose today would change both their lives, and neither outcome would be easy. The days that followed felt strangely quiet. For her, as if the small lane outside her shop had lost a piece of its usual life, she tried to keep herself busy by focusing on her orders, stitching new designs, adjusting hymns, and dealing with customers. Yet she could not ignore the heavy feeling in her chest. She told herself it was only natural that he had gone back to his family. Someone like him was not meant to stay in a tiny shop like hers. But even telling herself this did not ease the ache that stayed with her. From morning till night, every time she heard footsteps outside, her heart would lift for a second before she reminded herself not to expect anything. She refused to let her mother see her sadness, so she kept a soft smile on her face, even though her thoughts wandered again and again to the same person. It was difficult to accept how much a few weeks had affected her heart. She had lived a quiet life for years, but the gentle presence he brought with him had become something she looked forward to, something she had unknowingly begun to rely on. One evening, when the sun was fading and the sky had turned a deep orange, she sat at her work table and tried to focus on stitching a dress. But her hands slowed when she remembered the way he used to sit across from her, sometimes helping her sort buttons or fold leftover pieces of fabric. She did not realize she was smiling until her mother walked in and asked if she was thinking about something pleasant. She simply nodded and lowered her gaze. While she struggled in silence, he was dealing with his own storm. After being taken home by his parents, he felt like the walls around him had grown tighter. He had missed the warmth of the little shop, the simple conversations, and the peaceful air that surrounded her. At home, his father kept reminding him about his responsibilities and future plans, insisting that he had wasted enough time already. But none of these lectures touched his heart. Instead, they pushed him further into confusion. His mother, softer than his father, still worried about the difference in their lives. She told him gently that the world outside was not always kind, and that people sometimes took advantage of kindness. He tried to explain that she had done nothing but help him, that she had not treated him like someone special or wealthy. But his parents' fears made him feel trapped once again. Days passed, and he kept replaying the moments they had shared in that small shop. He remembered how she listened to him without judgment, how she encouraged him to believe in himself, how she worked tirelessly to support her mother. He admired her strength more than she ever knew. The more he thought about it, the more restless he became. One night, he sat alone in his room with the lights off, staring at the window. He realized that he had allowed his doubts, and his family's pressure to push him away from the one person who made him feel truly understood. He could not keep living with that regret. He needed to make his own choices, not ones shaped by fear or expectations. The next morning, woke up with a new sense of determination. He found his parents in the living room, and for the first time in a long while, spoke to them with complete honesty. He told them how unhappy he had been living according to everyone else's wishes. He explained that the peace he found in that shop was genuine, and that the kindness she showed him was real, not something money could buy. His father looked at him with surprise. Unable to believe that his usually quiet son was speaking so boldly, his mother, however, listened carefully. When he finished explaining everything, she asked him one simple question. "Do you truly believe she cares for you?" He nodded without hesitation. Seeing the sincerity in his eyes, she felt her own heart soften. She had always wanted her son to be happy, even though she sometimes forgot that happiness did not always come from wealth or status. After a long silence, she finally agreed to meet the woman herself, to understand the truth with her own eyes. Later that afternoon, while the shop owner worked on a customer's dress, She heard the bell above the door ring softly. She looked up, expecting a familiar neighbor, but instead saw a woman she did not recognize. The woman stood with quiet elegance, carrying an expression that was polite but unreadable. She greeted her kindly, unsure of who she was. The woman introduced herself and explained that she was the young man's mother. Hearing this, the shop owner felt her heart stop for a moment. She did not know whether she should be afraid or relieved. The older woman looked around the shop with gentle curiosity. She noticed how neat everything was, how carefully the fabrics were arranged, how much effort had been put into even the simplest corners. She watched the young tailor with thoughtful eyes as she worked and interacted with her customers. There was honesty in her movements, simplicity in her words, and genuine warmth in her smile. After the customers left, the two women sat together. The mother spoke quietly, admitting that she had judged too quickly before. She explained that her fears came from wanting to protect her son, not from looking down on anyone. The shop owner listened with humility, assuring her that she had never expected anything from him and that she only helped him because he truly needed it. Their conversation was calm and sincere, with both women slowly understanding each other. By the end of it, the mother felt a sense of peace she had not expected. She could see why her son had been drawn to this place. When she left the shop, she found her son waiting outside. She told him that he should follow his heart and that she would no longer stand in the way of his happiness. Hearing this filled him with relief so strong that he felt his chest loosen for the first time in days. As evening approached, he gathered the courage to walk back into the shop. He stood at the doorway for a moment, watching her as she arranged a few fabrics. She looked up, and their eyes met. For a second, both of them froze, unsure of what to say first. The silence broke when he stepped forward and apologized, sincerely, for disappearing without explaining. He told her everything's confusion, his parents' reaction, and the decision he had finally made. She listened quietly, her heart trembling with a mixture of relief and fear. She admitted that she had missed him too. Even though she tried to convince herself to forget, she shared how empty the shop had felt without him, how she had forced herself to stay busy so she would not fall apart. He moved closer, his voice soft but steady. He told her how her kindness had changed him, how her simple presence had taught him more about life than anything he had learned in his world of comfort. He said that he no longer wanted to run from what he felt. She looked down, overwhelmed by the sincerity in his words. When she finally looked up again, she saw the quiet hope in his eyes, the same hope she had been afraid to acknowledge. In her own heart, the room felt warm and still, as if the world outside had paused just for them. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to breathe easily. And he, standing before her, felt like he had come home after being lost for far too long. That moment marked the beginning of something new between them, something honest, courageous, and filled with a gentle promise that neither of them would ever forget. The soft glow of the evening sun filled the small shop as she slowly finished arranging the last piece of fabric for the day. It had been a long afternoon, one filled with emotions she was still trying to understand. Even though her heart felt lighter after speaking with his mother, a quiet nervousness still followed her. She kept wondering if he would truly come back, or if he would change his mind once he returned home. She tried to stay calm, but her hands trembled slightly each time she thought about it. She stepped outside the shop for a moment, letting the cool air touch her face. The street was slowly becoming quieter as people returned to their homes. She took a deep breath, hoping the fresh air would help her settle her thoughts. She told herself not to expect anything, not to hope too strongly, because life had taught her that too much hope could lead to pain. Still, her heart did not listen. Just as she turned to go back inside, she heard footsteps approaching. She froze. Something inside her knew it was him before she even looked up, and when she finally did, she found him standing just a few steps away, looking at her with a mixture of relief and softness. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They simply held each other's gaze, as if both were afraid that if they blinked, the moment would disappear. He walked closer. She stepped back slightly without even realizing it. It was not because she didn't want him there, but because her heart felt too full. He noticed her hesitation and smiled gently, telling her he understood. He then apologized. Not in a rushed or forced way, but in a slow, a sincere voice that carried every bit of emotion he had been hiding. He explained everything. How the days without her had felt empty, how he had argued with himself, how he finally spoke to his parents honestly for the first time in a long while. He told her how grateful he was that she remained kind even when he was confused and distant. As he continued speaking, she felt her doubts begin to fade away, replaced by a warmth she had been trying so hard to push down. When he finished, she looked at him for a long moment, searching for any trace of uncertainty. But all she saw was honesty and a deep calmness in his eyes. She finally found the courage to speak. She told him she had missed him too, even though she had tried to pretend she was fine. She explained how hard it had been to work every day while wondering if he had forgotten her. He stepped closer again, this time slowly enough that she could move if she wanted to. But she did not move away. The distance between them grew smaller until he was close enough for her to feel the warmth of his presence. He told her that her kindness had changed something inside him, something he didn't know needed changing until he met her. She lowered her gaze, overwhelmed by the sincerity in his voice. He gently lifted her chin so she would look at him again, and he promised that he was not there out of confusion or pressure. He was there because he wanted to be, because being around her made his life feel real and peaceful. For a moment, she felt tears gather in her eyes, not out of sadness, but from the sudden release of weeks of worry. She wiped them quickly, feeling shy. He smiled softly, telling her that she didn't have to hide her feelings from him anymore. They went inside the shop and sat together. The small room felt warm and safe, as if it was holding a story that only the two of them understood. They talked for a long time about their lives, their fears, their hopes, and the quiet dreams they had never shared with anyone. He told her he wanted to help her open a bigger shop someday, not because he thought she needed help, but because he believed in her talent. She told him she wanted him to follow his passion instead of trying, to live up to his family's expectations. Hours passed without either of them noticing. The world outside grew darker, but the shop felt lit with a gentle glow that came from their shared understanding. For the first time, she felt free to speak without fear of saying too much, and he felt free to listen without worrying about being judged. When it was finally time for him to leave, he stood up slowly, not wanting the moment to end. He told her that this was only the beginning, that he wanted to build something real with her. She felt her heart flutter at his words. She told him she was scared of where life might lead them. But she also admitted she wanted to walk that path with him. He reached out and took her hand with a gentle, steady touch. She felt her breath catch, but she did not pull away. He promised that no matter what challenges came their way, he would not let fear or pressure take him away from her again. The next morning, the shop owner woke with a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. She got ready and opened her shop as usual, but everything looked new somehow. The colors of the fabrics seemed brighter, the morning air felt fresher, and even the small bell above the door sounded sweeter. Later in the day, his mother visited again, this time with a warm smile. She thanked the young tailor for being a good influence on her son and for helping him see life with clearer eyes. Her words were gentle and genuine, carrying none of the harshness from before. The two women spoke softly, beginning to understand each other more deeply. As days turned into weeks, their bond continued to grow. He visited the shop often, sometimes helping her sort materials, sometimes just sitting nearby as she worked. They began to build small routines together, morning walks, shared meals, quiet conversations at the end of a long day. Nothing was rushed. Everything felt natural. Their journey was not perfect. There were days filled with uncertainties and moments when old fears tried to return. But each time they talked openly and reminded each other why they had chosen this path. Their connection strengthened, not because everything was easy, but because they learned to face things together. In time, the young woman's shop began to grow. With his support and her hard work, she managed to expand her business. She didn't accept any special favors or shortcuts. She simply let him stand by her side as she worked for her dreams. And he found himself becoming more confident and peaceful, no longer burdened by expectations that once weighed him down. One evening, as they stood outside the shop watching the sunset, He told her that meeting her had changed the direction of his life. She smiled, saying that he had brought warmth into hers. They looked at each other with the quiet understanding of two people who had walked through storms and found clarity. On the other side, their love grew not through dramatic moments but through simple gestures, shared laughter, gentle words, patient listening, and honest support. It was a love born from kindness, strengthened by courage, carried forward by trust. Their story became a beautiful reminder that sometimes the most meaningful relationships begin in the simplest places, and sometimes all it takes is one moment of kindness to change lives forever.